I'm Lee, 29, female, and my world shifted the moment my boyfriend told me he wasn't my maid after I asked him to simply help with the dishes. It wasn't the words themselves, though they stung with a casual cruelty that took my breath away. It was the clarity they provided. In that single, sharp moment, 2 years of vague frustrations, simmering resentment, and quiet exhaustion crystallized into a single, undeniable truth. I wasn't his partner. I had become his unpaid, unappreciated live-in service provider. And with his words, he had just handed me my resignation papers. Our story didn't begin in a battlefield of dirty dishes and overflowing laundry baskets. It began, as most do, with a spark. I met Cole at a tech conference after party. I was a software developer, tucked away in a corner, trying to decompress after 3 days of relentless networking. He was a marketing manager, a whirlwind of charisma and easy confidence, who strode over and started a conversation as if we were old friends. He had a smile that could disarm armies, and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in a crowded room. In those early days, our life together felt like a perfect collaboration. He was the vibrant, outgoing force, and I was the steady, thoughtful anchor. We complemented each other. Our first apartment, a cozy one-bedroom with a leaky faucet and a charming view of a brick wall, felt like a palace. We were a team. We'd tackle grocery shopping together, turning it into a game of who could find the weirdest flavored potato chips. We'd even make laundry day fun, folding sheets together in a tangled, laughing mess. He'd often say, "We're better together, Lee. We can do anything as long as we're a team." I believed him. I held on to that belief long after the evidence suggested otherwise. The shift was gradual, a slow erosion rather than a sudden crack. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment that we started to become you. Looking back, I can see the trail of breadcrumbs, the small signposts I chose to ignore out of love, hope, or perhaps just sheer exhaustion. The first significant signpost was what I now call the laundry incident. It happened about a year into our cohabitation. I had always done the laundry, it just fell into my routine. One week, I was swamped with a major project launch at work, pulling 12-hour days. I asked Cole if he could possibly handle the laundry. He agreed, albeit with a sigh that made it sound like I'd asked him to defuse a bomb. Later that evening, he stormed out of the bedroom holding a once-white t-shirt that now bore a faint pinkish hue. "Lee, you can't just mix whites and colors. This was my favorite shirt," he exclaimed, his voice filled with an astonishing level of indignation. I stared at the shirt, then at him. "It was an accident, Cole. I'm sorry. I'm just so tired I probably wasn't thinking." "Well, this is why I can't do things," he declared, throwing the shirt onto the couch as if it were contaminated. "I don't know the right way, and then I mess it up and it's a disaster." From that day forward, laundry became my exclusive domain. Anytime the topic arose, he would bring up the pink shirt disaster, treating it as definitive proof of his incompetence. It was a brilliant, if infuriating, move. He had weaponized his own mistake into a permanent get-out-of-laundry-free card. I was too tired to argue, so I just added it to my list. The next signpost was the grocery bill argument. Cole loved good food, and I loved cooking for us. But as my workload increased, so did my reliance on pre-made sauces or slightly more expensive, quicker-to-cook ingredients. One evening, as I was unbagging groceries, he picked up the receipt from the counter and his eyebrows furrowed. "$180 for a week?" he asked, a critical edge to his voice. "What did you even buy, gold-plated lettuce?" I felt a flash of hot anger. I had just navigated a crowded grocery store after a 10-hour workday, planned our meals for the week, and carried 6 heavy bags up 3 flights of stairs. "I bought food for us to eat, Cole," I said, my voice tight. "If you think you can do it cheaper, please feel free." I gestured to the door. "The store is still open." He scoffed, dropping the receipt as if it were beneath him. "I'm just saying, it seems like a lot. We need to be more careful with money." He wasn't wrong, but his criticism was completely detached from any sense of shared responsibility. He was the critic in the stands, commenting on the performance of the player on the field. He wanted to enjoy the benefits of a well-stocked kitchen without contributing any of the labor, the planning, the shopping, the budgeting, the carrying. He offered no solutions, no offer to help, just judgment. So grocery shopping remained on my list, but now it came with a side of financial guilt. From there, the decline accelerated. His contributions dwindled from small to non-existent. "I'll do it." Later became his go-to phrase for any request. The dishes he promised to wash after dinner would still be sitting in the sink the next morning. The trash he swore he'd take out would start to overflow. Later was a mythical time that never arrived. Eventually, "I'll do it later" morphed into "I forgot," often accompanied by a charmingly apologetic smile that I was growing to resent. The final stage of the decline was the most maddening, unacknowledged silence. I would come home to find the apartment in a state of disarray, his work clothes from the day before on the floor, his empty coffee mug on the bookshelf, crumbs on the counter. He would be on the couch, scrolling through his phone or watching a game, seemingly oblivious to the chaos he had created. It was as if he had developed a special kind of blindness, one that rendered his own mess invisible. I tried to talk to him, I really did. I tried the soft approach. "Hey honey, it would really help me out if we could tidy up together before bed." I tried the direct approach. "Cole, I cannot be the only one cleaning this apartment. I need you to do your share." I tried the scheduled approach. "How about you're in charge of bathrooms and trash, and I'll handle the kitchen and laundry?" Every attempt was met with deflection or temporary compliance. He'd agree, maybe even clean the bathroom once, and then things would revert to the status quo within a week. He treated my requests not as a bid for partnership, but as nagging. He saw household chores not as a shared responsibility of adulthood, but as my responsibility that I was trying to unfairly push onto him. The weight of it all was crushing me. I wasn't just doing the physical labor, I was doing the mental labor, too. I was the project manager of our entire domestic life, and I was burning out. This long, slow history of mounting resentment brought us to that fateful Tuesday evening. It was the end of a particularly brutal week for me. A critical bug had been found in a software build my team was responsible for, and we had been in crisis mode for 72 hours straight. I had barely slept, subsisting on stale office coffee and the adrenaline of a looming deadline. When I finally dragged myself home, every bone in my body ached. Cole was already there, lounging on the couch. He'd had a good week, having landed a new client for his marketing firm. He was in high spirits. "There she is, the code queen," he said, not getting up. "Tough week." "You have no idea," I mumbled, dropping my bag and keys. I should have ordered a pizza. I should have just gone to bed. But a small, foolish part of me still craved a moment of normalcy, a shared meal to reconnect after a stressful week. So I marshaled the last of my energy reserves and cooked a simple pasta dish. We ate, and he talked animatedly about his successful client pitch. I tried to listen, nodding along while my brain felt like it was full of static. After we finished, I stood up and started collecting the plates. Our 2 plates, our 2 forks, our 2 glasses, the pot, the colander, the sauce-stained wooden spoon. It was a small mountain in my tired hands. I looked over at Cole, who had already migrated back to the couch and was flipping through streaming services on the TV. "Cole," I asked. My voice sounded small, even to me. "Yeah," he answered, eyes on the screen. Could you please help me with the dishes?" He didn't even turn his head. He let out a small, dismissive scoff, and then he said the 10 words that would unravel our world. "I'm not your maid, clean it yourself." The air in the room didn't just go still, it felt like it had been sucked out entirely. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint, artificial laughter from the sitcom Cole was now watching on TV. His words hung in the space between us, shimmering with a casual, devastating cruelty. "I'm not your maid, clean it yourself." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't delivered in anger. It was said with the bored, dismissive tone one might use to brush off a pesky fly, and that's what made it so much worse. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment outburst. This was a statement of fact, a declaration of his core belief system. In his view of our world, there were people who served and people who were served. He had made it clear which category he belonged to, and by extension, which one he had assigned to me. I stood there by the table, my hands full of dirty dishes, and I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the hot sting of tears or the familiar, weary ache of disappointment. What I felt was a profound, almost terrifying, calm. It was the kind of calm that comes after a violent storm has passed, leaving behind a landscape that is irrevocably altered. It was the quiet click of a switch being flipped in the deepest part of my mind. All the noise, the years of gentle reminders, the frustration, the excuses, the arguments, the resentment, it all just stopped. In its place was a singular Prist. Inni thought, he is absolutely right. I am not his maid. A maid is someone you hire. A maid is someone you pay. A maid has set hours and defined duties. A maid can quit. I had been performing the duties for free at all hours without a contract. I had been acting like a maid. And worse, I had been acting like a maid who wasn't even allowed to resign. Until now. He hadn't just insulted me, he had, in his own careless way, liberated me. He had given me the permission I was never brave enough to give myself. I turned my head slowly and looked at him. He was completely absorbed in his show, a small smile playing on his lips, oblivious to the tectonic shift that had just occurred in his own home. He had thrown a grenade into the heart of our relationship and hadn't even noticed the explosion. I walked into the kitchen, the weight of the dishes in my hands feeling different now. It wasn't the weight of a shared life, it was the weight of a job. I carefully scraped the leftover pasta from my plate into the trash. I rinsed my fork and my glass. I washed the section of the pot that had cooked my portion of the food. I placed my clean items in the drying rack. Then I took his plate, still smeared with tomato sauce, his fork, his glass, and the rest of the dirty cookware, and I placed them neatly on the counter next to the sink. His mess. His responsibility. I walked back into the living room. The sitcom's laugh track filled the silence. I looked at the man on the couch, the man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, and I felt an odd sense of detachment, as if I were looking at a stranger. "You're right," I said. My voice was even, devoid of any emotion. It was so neutral that it finally pierced his bubble of blissful ignorance. He muted the TV and turned to look at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "What?" he asked. "You're right," I repeated, standing straight. "You are not my maid. I'm sorry for treating you like you were." A slow, self-satisfied grin spread across his face. He thought he had won. He thought I was conceding, finally accepting the established order of things. He saw it as an apology for nagging him. "Well, good," he said, puffing his chest out slightly. "Glad we're on the same page." He unmuted the TV. The matter settled in his mind. He had successfully put his disobedient employee back in her place. He had no idea he had just made her CEO of her own life. I didn't say another word. I walked into our bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the strange, liberating calm wash over me again. The mental checklist that was constantly running in my head: dishes, laundry, trash, buy milk, schedule dentist appointment, figure out dinner for tomorrow, it just stopped. The part of my brain that had been dedicated to managing Cole and our household went blessedly silent. I was no longer the project manager. My only project from this moment forward was me. The plan wasn't born of malice. It wasn't about revenge in the classic sense. I didn't want to punish him, I wanted to free myself. My plan was simple, logical, and based entirely on his own words. I would stop being his maid. I would stop doing his share. I would only be responsible for myself, my space, and my things. I would, in essence, treat him as what he had become, a roommate. A messy, inconsiderate roommate, but a roommate nonetheless. And I would start immediately. The first night of my quiet revolution was profoundly, unnervingly normal on the surface. Cole finished his show and came to bed an hour later, completely oblivious. He didn't notice that the kitchen wasn't sparkling clean or that the scent of lemon dish soap wasn't hanging in the air. He slipped into his side of the bed, which I had made that morning out of habit, and was asleep in minutes. I lay awake for a long time, not with anxiety, but with a strange sense of anticipation. It felt like the night before the first day of a new job. The next morning, the new reality began to take shape. I woke up at my usual time. My routine had always been to get up, put on the coffee for both of us, and start tidying the kitchen while it brewed. Today, I walked into the kitchen and saw his dirty plate and utensils exactly where I had left them. A small, dried ring of tomato sauce was starting to form. My hands twitched with the ingrained impulse to just clean it. It would take 30 seconds. It would be so much easier to just wash it and be done with it. But that was the thinking of the old Lee. That was the thinking of the maid. The new Lee, the Lee who was merely Cole's roommate, walked past his mess. I took out a single coffee filter, put in enough grounds for 1 cup, and brewed a mug just for myself. While it dripped, I took out my favorite ceramic mug, a gift from my sister, and waited. The coffee was ready. I poured it, added a splash of milk, and enjoyed the rich, dark aroma. It tasted Ike freedom. I washed my mug and the single-serve coffee filter basket as soon as I was done, placing them back in their respective spots. The kitchen was now clean, except for the small, isolated island of Cole's mess. He stumbled out of the bedroom about 20 minutes later, yawning. "Morning," he grumbled, heading straight for the coffee pot. He lifted it and his brow furrowed when he found it empty. "Did you not make coffee?" "I made a cup for myself," I said cheerfully, grabbing my laptop bag from the chair. "I just finished it." He looked from the empty pot to me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "You only made 1 cup." "Yep," I said, slinging the bag over my shoulder. "Figured you could make a fresh pot when you were ready for one." He looked baffled, as if I'd just suggested he build a nuclear reactor before his first caffeine hit. Making coffee had been my job for 2 years. His bewilderment was so genuine that it was almost comical. He had no framework for a world in which a hot pot of coffee wasn't magically waiting for him each morning. "Oh, okay," he said, still processing. I just smiled. "Have a great day, Cole," I said, and walked out the door, leaving him staring at the empty coffee pot and his dirty plate from the night before. That day at work, I felt lighter than I had in years. The constant, low-level hum of domestic anxiety in the back of my mind was gone. I wasn't mentally scheduling a grocery run on my lunch break or worrying about what to cook for dinner. I was just working. I was focused, efficient, and productive. When I got home, Cole was already there. He was on a work call in the living room, pacing back and forth. I noted with some interest that his dirty plate was still by the sink, now joined by an empty cereal bowl and a sticky coffee mug. He had made his own coffee after all, a small victory for self-sufficiency. I gave him a little wave and went to the kitchen. I made myself a simple dinner, a salad with grilled chicken. I used 1 bowl, 1 fork, and a small cutting board. When I was done, I washed my 3 items, dried them, and put them away. The kitchen was, once again, clean except for his growing collection. He finished his call and came into the kitchen, sniffing the air. "Did you eat already?" "I did," I said. "I was starving." "Oh, what you make?" he asked, opening the fridge. "Is there any left?" "Just a salad for one," I replied. "Sorry, I didn't make extra." He closed the fridge, his good mood from the morning clearly gone. "So, what's for dinner then?" he asked, as if I were a restaurant hostess who was hiding the menu. This was the moment. This was a critical test of my resolve. The old Lee would have caved. She would have felt guilty and offered to whip something up for him. But the new Lee looked him straight in the eye, gave a little shrug, and said, "I'm not sure what you're planning on, but I've already eaten." The look on his face was a masterpiece of confusion, irritation, and wounded pride. He stared at me for a full 10 seconds, waiting for me to crack to say "just kidding," and pull a lovingly prepared meal out of the oven. I didn't. I just stood there, a picture of pleasant neutrality. He ended up ordering a burger and fries, which he ate out of the takeout container while watching TV. He left the greasy container and crumpled napkins on the coffee table when he was done. I looked at the new mess, felt a familiar surge of annoyance, and then firmly reminded myself, not my circus, not my monkeys. This pattern continued for 2 more days. I operated as a completely independent unit within our shared space. I made my food, cleaned my dishes, and tidied my things. His side of the reality was beginning to pile up. Dirty dishes, takeout containers, and a growing pile of his clothes on the clothes chair in the bedroom. He was becoming increasingly sullen, shooting me passive-aggressive looks, but he didn't directly confront me. Perhaps he thought it was a phase, that I was trying to make a point and would soon give up. Then, on Friday morning, I was handed a golden opportunity. "Hey," he said, walking into the living room with his suitcase. "Almost forgot to tell you, I'm heading to that marketing conference in Chicago this morning. I'll be back Tuesday night." It took everything in me not to break into a triumphant smile. 5 full days. An entire business week of blissful solitude to fully implement the New World Order. "Oh wow, that's great, Cole," I said, my voice dripping with sincerity. "Have a wonderful time, be safe." He seemed to soften a little at my cheerful tone, perhaps thinking my mood had passed. "Thanks. Yeah, it should be a good one. Hey, listen," he said, pausing at the door. "We're almost out of clean towels, and I couldn't find any of my gray work socks." It was a classic Cole move. Not a request, but a statement of a problem, with the unspoken expectation that I would be the solution. I tills. Ted my head. "Oh, that's a shame. Well, have a great trip," I said, giving him a brilliant smile. I didn't offer to do the laundry. I didn't offer a solution for his sock predicament. I just wished him well. He hovered at the door for another moment, waiting. When no offer came, a flash of irritation crossed his face before he masked it. "Right, okay, well, see you Tuesday." "Bye," I chirped. The moment the door clicked shut, I let out a long, slow breath. I looked around the apartment. At his dishes in the sink, the takeout bag on the coffee table, the overflowing laundry hamper in the corner of our bedroom. It was a mess. But for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of it. It wasn't my mess to worry about. I put on my favorite playlist, turned the volume up high, and got to work. But I wasn't cleaning the apartment. I was drawing a line. A big, fat, uncrossable line right down the middle of our life. And it felt absolutely wonderful. The 5 days Cole was gone were a revelation. It wasn't just about the absence of his physical mess. It was about the absence of the mental load that came with it. The apartment transformed from a source of constant, low-grade stress into a sanctuary. My sanctuary. My first act as the sole, conscientious occupant of my half of the apartment was to tackle the laundry, but I did it with a surgical precision I'd never employed before. I meticulously went through the main hamper, picking out every single item of clothing that belonged to me. My shirts, my jeans, my underwear, my workout clothes. I left every one of his socks, boxers, and t-shirts behind. I did the same with the towels, taking only the 2 that I had used. I did 2 loads of laundry just for me. When they were done, I folded my warm, clean clothes and put them away in my drawers and on my side of the closet. I took my 2 clean towels and hung them neatly on my hook in the bathroom. The main hamper, now containing only Cole's things, was still comically full. I pushed it over to his side of the bedroom. His problem. Next, the bedroom itself. I stripped the sheets and duvet cover from my side of the bed only. It was a bit awkward, but I managed. I put on my favorite set of crisp, cool linen sheets that Cole had always complained were too scratchy. I fluffed my pillow. My side of the bed looked like a serene island in a sea of his rumpled, unmade mess. I picked up my stray book and pair of slippers from the floor and put them away. I left his discarded clothes and work bag exactly where they lay. The kitchen was the most satisfying transformation. I gathered all his dirty dishes, the plate from Tuesday, the cereal bowl and mug from Wednesday, the collection of glasses he'd used throughout the week, and stacked them neatly on his side of the counter. It was a rather impressive tower of neglect. Then I deep-cleaned everything else. I scrubbed the sink until it gleamed. I wiped down all the countertops except for the square footage occupied by his dishes. I cleaned the stovetop. I mopped the floor. The result was bizarre and beautiful. 90% of the kitchen was sparkling, a testament to what could be. The remaining 10% was a quarantine zone of his own making. Finally, I went grocery shopping, For one, I bought all my favorite things I rarely got because Cole didn't like them: spicy arugula, goat cheese, dark chocolate with sea salt, that expensive brand of coffee he called burnt. The fridge, once I'd purged the old, shared items, looked refreshingly minimalist. It was my food, my fuel. For the next 4 days, I lived in this newly partitioned world, and it was glorious. I would come home from work to an apartment that was exactly as clean as I had left it. There were no new mysterious crumbs on the counter, no wet towels on the floor, no shoes left in the middle of the hallway to trip over. The peace was absolute. I rediscovered silence. I had grown so accustomed to the background noise of Cole's presence, the TV constantly blaring, the loud phone calls, the video game explosions, that the quiet felt like a physical presence. I sat on the couch and read a book for 2 hours straight, uninterrupted. I worked on a personal coding project, a little passion app I hadn't had the mental energy to touch in months, with nothing but the soft click-clack of my own keyboard for a soundtrack. One night, I cooked myself a beautiful piece of salmon with roasted asparagus. I ate it at the dining table, not in front of the TV. I lit a candle. I played quiet jazz music. It felt less like dinner and more like a date with myself. A date with a person I was starting to like again, a person who had been buried under endless to-do lists and the needs of someone else. In this quiet space, my feelings about Cole and our relationship began to clarify. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was profoundly sad. Sad for the partnership we once had, the one I had tried so hard to keep alive. Sad for the man who had let his charm and charisma curdle into laziness and entitlement. He wasn't a bad person, not really. He was just comfortable. I had made his life so comfortable that he saw no reason to put in any effort. I had been his safety net, his maid, his cook, his personal assistant. By removing myself from those roles, I wasn't just reclaiming my own life. I was forcing him to finally confront the reality of his. I realized I didn't hate him, but I wasn't sure if I was in love with him anymore. The person I loved was the man who folded laundry with me, who saw us as a team. That man hadn't lived in this apartment for a very long time. I was in love with a ghost. On Tuesday afternoon, a few hours before he was due to arrive, I did a final walkthrough. My side of the bedroom was an oasis of calm. My bathroom hook had a fresh, dry towel. The kitchen was spotless, save for Mount Cole on the counter. The living room was tidy. I felt a pang of anxiety about the confrontation to come, but it was overshadowed by a stronger feeling: resolve. This wasn't a game. It wasn't a prank. It was a mirror. I was about to show Cole a perfect, unvarnished reflection of his contribution to our life together. The house was a physical manifestation of our dynamic. I was pulling 90% of the weight, and he was letting his 10% rot. He could get angry, he could yell, he could call me petty, but he could not call me a liar. The evidence was all around him. I sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and waited. The ball was no longer in my court. It was heading straight for his, and I had no idea if he would even know how to swing at it. The sound of the key in the lock was louder than I expected. It sliced through the quiet apartment, and I felt my stomach do a little flip. I stayed on the couch, my book resting in my lap, and braced myself. The door swung open, and there he was, Cole. He looked tired from his flight but buoyed by the energy of his trip. He dropped his suitcase and carry-on by the door with a heavy thud. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the tidy living room. It was a line he always used, a relic from the early happy days. Tonight, it sounded jarringly out of place. "Hey," I said, my voice even. "Welcome back. How was the conference?" "Long but good. We killed it," he said, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it onto the arm of the chair. It immediately slid off and pooled on the floor. I didn't move. He walked towards me, leaned down, and gave me a quick, perfunctory kiss. He smelled like airport coffee and stale air. "What's up? Quiet in here." "Just been relaxing, reading," I replied. "Nice," he said, straightening up and stretching. "Man, I am so thirsty." He turned and walked towards the kitchen. This was it, phase 1 of the discovery. I held my breath. I heard the tap run as he filled a glass with water. Then, silence. A few seconds passed. It was a loaded, heavy silence. Lee, he called out, his voice having lost its cheerful edge. It was replaced by a note of confusion. Yeah, I answered, not moving from my spot. What's with the leaning tower of Pisa over here? He asked. I could hear him shifting things around, the clatter of ceramic on the granite countertop. Why are all these dishes still here? I thought these were from last week. They are, I said calmly. And you just left them here, the whole time I was gone. His voice was now laced with disbelief. Those are your dishes, Cole. I cleaned mine. He appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, holding the glass of water. He stared at me, his brow deeply furrowed. He looked like he was trying to solve a complex math problem in his head. My dishes? What are you talking about? We live together. We do, I agreed. And I decided to take your advice. You told me you're not my maid and that I should clean it myself. You were right, so I did. I cleaned my stuff. The cogs were turning, but they were grinding. He still didn't fully grasp the scope of it. He took a sip of water, his eyes scanning the pristine living room, then back to my neutral expression. He was looking for a crack, a sign that I was joking. He found none. He shook his head slightly, as if to clear it, and walked towards the bedroom. Whatever, Lee, I'm exhausted. I need to unpack and take a shower. Phase 2, I listened to his footsteps disappear down the hall. I heard the bedroom door open. And then another silence. This one was longer, more profound. It was the silence of pure, unadulterated shock. I heard the sound of a clothes hanger scraping across the closet rod. I heard a drawer open and close with more force than necessary. Then, his footsteps, heavier this time, angrier, coming back down the hall. He stormed into the living room. His face, which had been confused moments before, was now a mask of thunderous rage. Okay, what is going on? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. This isn't funny, Lee. My side of the room is a disaster. The hamper is overflowing. And where are all the towels? My towel is in the bathroom, I said, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I refused to let my voice tremble. As for your towels, I imagine they are in the hamper with the rest of your laundry. My laundry, he almost yelled the words. It's our laundry, you always do the laundry. My laundry is clean and put away, I said, gesturing vaguely towards the bedroom. I ran a couple of loads for myself while you were gone. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. He looked from me to the kitchen, then back to me again. The full picture was finally snapping into focus in his mind, the dishes, the laundry, the towels, my calm demeanor. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a mood. It was a meticulously executed plan. You're kidding me, he said, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping his lips. You can't be serious. You're really doing this. This is some kind of petty revenge because I didn't want to do the dishes one time. This isn't about one time, Cole, and it's not revenge, I said, finally closing my book and placing it on the coffee table. I stood up to face him, to be on his level. This is a direct consequence of your own words and actions. I am no longer managing the household. I am only managing myself. I've created a system that is fair and equal. We are now truly splitting the work 50-50. My 50% is done. I gestured around the clean half of our shared existence. The rest, I said, my gaze falling on his jacket, still lying on the floor, is your half. His face went from red to a strange, blotchy white. The anger was still there, but it was now competing with a dawning horror. He looked around the apartment as if seeing it for the first time. He saw the invisible line I had drawn, and he finally understood that he was on the wrong side of it. This is insane, he whispered, shaking his head. You've gone insane. No, I said, my voice soft but unwavering. For the first time in a very long time, I think I've finally gone sane. Cole stared at me, his expression a chaotic mix of fury and bewilderment. He looked like a man who had confidently walked into his own house, only to find that all the furniture had been replaced and the walls had been moved. His reality had been upended, and he was flailing, searching for something solid to hold onto. His first instinct was to attack. "This is the most childish, passive-aggressive thing I have ever seen in my life," he exploded, throwing his hands up in the air. "You're punishing me, all of this performance," he gestured wildly around the room, "is because I was tired and didn't want to wash a few stupid plates." "If it was just about a few stupid plates, they would have been washed by you the next morning," I countered, my voice remaining steady despite the storm raging in front of me. "But they weren't. They sat there for 5 days, Cole. Because in your mind, they weren't your problem. You have a roommate you expect to clean up after you." "I have a partner," he shot back. "A partner is supposed to help me. We're a team. What happened to that?" The sheer audacity of him quoting our old mantra, the one he had systematically dismantled with his own inaction, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. The calm I had cultivated for days was finally beginning to crack, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "A team," I repeated, my voice dropping. "Don't you dare talk to me about a team. A team is about mutual support. A team is about shared responsibility. For the last year, I have been the only one playing for this team, Cole. I've been the offense, the defense, the coach, and the water boy. You've been a spectator in the stands, eating a hot dog and complaining about the score." I took a step closer, my own anger now fueling me. "Let's talk about the team, shall we? Was it teamwork when you stained a shirt and used it as a permanent excuse to never touch the washing machine again? Was it teamwork when you criticized my grocery bills but never once offered to plan a meal or set foot in a supermarket? Was it teamwork every single time you said, 'I'll do it later,' and then just didn't?" I was ticking off the incidents on my fingers, and with each one, he flinched as if I were landing a physical blow. The history I had lived with silently for so long was now being laid bare, and he had no defense against it. The truth was my weapon, and it was devastatingly effective. "I have begged you for help," I continued, my voice thick with the emotion I had suppressed for so long. "I have asked nicely, I have made charts, I have tried to be patient. I have exhausted myself trying to get you to be a partner to me. And what was my reward? What did I get for all that effort? You looked me in the eye after I cooked a meal for us and told me to clean it myself because you are not my maid. You drew the line, Cole, not me. I'm just finally respecting the Endary you sut." His rage began to deflate, punctured by the undeniable truth of my words. He sank down onto the arm of the couch, his face losing its angry color and becoming pale. The fight went out of him, replaced by a look of dawning, sickening realization. He wasn't just seeing a clean apartment and a pile of his own dirty dishes. He was seeing his own behavior reflected back at him in stark, unforgiving detail. He was seeing himself through my eyes for the first time. He started, but his voice failed him. He swallowed hard. I didn't realize." "Of course you didn't," I said, my voice softening slightly. The anger was receding, leaving only a vast, aching sadness in its place. "Why would you? Life was easy. You had all the benefits of a partnership with none of the responsibilities. I made it easy for you, that's my fault. I enabled this. I kept quietly picking up your slack, hoping you would eventually notice and step up. I was wrong." Silence fell between us, thick and heavy. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, a silent witness to the drama. Cole wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the floor, at his jacket lying in a heap where he'd tossed it. It was such a small thing, that jacket, but in that moment it seemed to represent everything. The thoughtlessness, the casual disregard, the quiet assumption that someone else would handle it. He finally looked up at me, and his eyes were glistening. The anger was gone. The defensiveness was gone. All that was left was a raw, gaping shame. "I'm so sorry, Lee," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Oh God, I'm such a jerk." He buried his face in his hands, and his shoulders began to shake. A choked sob escaped him. It wasn't the sound of self-pity. It was the sound of genuine, gut-wrenching remorse. It was the sound of a man finally, truly understanding the depth of his failure. I stood there, watching him break down, and I felt no triumph. There was no "I told you so" satisfaction. There was only the heartbreaking reality of our situation. I had had to shatter our life together just to get him to see his part in it. The reckoning had come, and it had broken him. Now, the only question that remained was whether we could ever possibly put the pieces back together. The storm had passed, leaving a fragile, somber quiet in its wake. Cole's sobs eventually subsided into ragged breaths. He sat on the edge of the couch, his head in his hands, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The charismatic, confident marketing manager was gone, replaced by a man stripped bare of his pretenses. I walked over and sat in the chair opposite him, giving him space. The anger and adrenaline had drained out of me, leaving me feeling hollowed out and weary to my bones. "I didn't see it," he said, his voice muffled by his hands. "I swear, Lee, I just took it all for granted. I took you for granted. It was just the way things were. You were so good at everything, it was just easier to let you do it." "It wasn't easier for me, Cole," I said softly. "I know," he whispered, finally looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a shame so profound it was hard to look at. "I know that now, seeing it all. My mess just sitting there. It's like you held up a mirror and I saw a monster. Not a monster, but a lazy, selfish child. I was being a child." This was the most honest, self-aware thing he had said in years. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't deflecting blame. He was owning it, fully and painfully. We talked for hours. It was the conversation I had been trying to have for a year, but this time, he was actually listening. We talked about the laundry, the groceries, the mental load. I explained the exhaustion of not just doing the tasks, but having to be the one who always remembered the tasks needed doing. He talked about how his own upbringing, with a mother who did everything, had shaped his expectations without him even realizing it. He admitted that he had enjoyed the freedom of not having to worry about domestic life, and had selfishly ignored the cost to me. There were tears, apologies, and long, difficult silences. It wasn't about forgiveness, not yet. It was about understanding. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, when the sky outside was beginning to soften from black to gray, he stood up. "Okay," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. "Words aren't enough, I get it." He walked into the kitchen. I followed him, watching. He stood before the tower of his own neglect, the monument to his thoughtlessness that had sat on the counter for a week. He picked up the top plate, the one with the dried-on pasta sauce, and turned on the hot water. He started to wash the dishes. I stood in the doorway and watched him. He worked methodically, scrubbing each plate, each fork, each glass until it was clean. It was just a simple chore, the very one that had started this whole avalanche, but now. It was a symbolic act. It was penance. It was a promise. It was the first stone being laid for a new foundation. When he was done with the dishes, he didn't stop. He wiped down the counter. He took the overflowing trash bag out. He came back, put a new bag in the can, and then looked at me. "Laundry next," he said. We went to the bedroom, and together we sorted his clothes. He asked me questions he had never asked before. "Okay, so delicates go in cold water, right? And what setting do I use for towels?" I answered him without sarcasm, without an ounce of "I told you so." I just gave him the information. I was no longer his maid, but I could be his teacher. The next day, we sat down at the clean kitchen table with a notepad and a pen. We didn't just make a chore chart, we made a life chart. We divided every conceivable household task, from cleaning the bathrooms to paying the utility bills. We created a shared digital grocery list and a shared calendar for household reminders. We scheduled a 15-minute State of the Union meeting for every Sunday night to check in with each other. We were building, from scratch, the partnership we should have had all along. It wasn't a magic fix. The trust that had been so deeply broken will take a long time to heal. There are still moments when I see him leave a mug on the coffee table and my stomach clenches, waiting for the old patterns to re-emerge. But now, the mug doesn't sit there for long. He'll notice it himself a few minutes later and take it to the kitchen. He is trying. He is present. He is finally showing up. I don't know what the future holds for us. Maybe the damage was too deep, and this new foundation won't be strong enough. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel a flicker of hope. I am no longer carrying the weight of our life alone. I have a partner who is finally, actively trying to build something with me, not just live inside what I have built. The apartment is no longer a battleground, it's becoming a home again. A home shared by two people who are both, finally, doing the work. For the Reddit audience, I wanted to share this because I know I'm not the only one who has felt this way. The mental load is real, and it's exhausting. Sometimes, the only way to make someone see the weight you're carrying is to gently set it down and let them feel it for themselves. It was a huge risk, and it almost ended our relationship, but it also saved it from the slow, resentful death it was dying. To anyone feeling invisible in their own home, sometimes the quietest actions make the loudest statements. You are not a maid, you deserve a partner.